monthly end.
Hello, lovely listeners. I'm Lil.
And I'm Fitz.
And today we're bringing you the first of 4 spooky season shorts, one a week for the month of October as we count down to Halloween 2025. And if you're used to tuning into our regular episodes, don't worry, we've got a couple of those to come this month as well.
But in these mini episodes, we'll be sharing some postcard-sized true ghost stories that you, our lovely listeners, have written in to share with us. So, without further ado, let's get ready for Halloween with some of your real spooky encounters. Kathryn wrote in to tell us about a strange experience she had had on a historic trail. Kathryn writes, I'm from Massachusetts and was showing a friend around one of the graveyards on what is called the Freedom Trail. In the Old Granary Burial Ground near the State House, I was reading one of the headstones when I saw a woman in an 18th century style of clothing. I whipped around to look, and she vanished. There are many people buried there from that era, so I don't know if she was one of them or just passing through. It's one of the most stark sightings I've had. I do have a history of seeing shadow people and animals and having noise disturbances, but rarely one where I could see enough detail that I could tell you the colour of her dress and that she had high cheekbones.
Now, I had never heard of the Freedom Trail before, but it sounds like a really cool thing to check out if you're in the area. Basically, it's a 2.5 mile red brick paved walking trail through Boston that takes in a whopping 16 heritage sites from the 17th, 18th and 19th centuries, including museums, churches, meeting houses, burial grounds, parks, a ship, and historic markers that tell you the story of the American Revolution and beyond.
Yeah, I was really fascinated by this. I actually looked it up. I looked on Google Earth. And when you say like a red brick paved
it's
walk,
literally
there are literally bricks in the, well, what we would call the pavement,
yeah.
the sidewalk for Americans. It's really cool. So
I know,
you can take a tour
really
whenever you
surprised.
want.
When it said, I kept reading this red route, and I was like, what do they mean a red route? And then like you, I was like, oh, it's actually paved, like a yellow brick road, but a red brick road.
Indeed. Follow the path of the American Revolution. And because we were quite new to this, we took a look at the tourist information site, basically, and they had a quite interesting and very comprehensive breakdown of all the places that are on the route. But it kind of sums it up in this little blurb they've got, which was really interesting. It says, the Freedom Trail tells the story of America's origins through places, people, and pivotal moments. At the heart of the Foundation's mission is the belief that the fight for freedom belongs to everyone. The Foundation recognizes America's path to liberty has been complex and uneven, with many experiencing injustices, even as others gained freedom, and is committed to presenting this history in a way that is accurate, comprehensive, and grounded in respected scholarship, honoring the experiences and contributions of people of all races, religions, backgrounds, and identities, both past and present.
I thought that sounded pretty cool. It sounds pretty inclusive, which is nice. And it looks like they've got loads and loads of different guided walks. So even if you've done the trail once, I think there's loads of different ways you can experience it because they've got so many different guided walks that do like different aspects of history. There's just so much going on there. I kind of really want to visit.
Yeah, it looks like you could spend days and days and days going on different tours and walks and seeing different museums and still not cover half of it.
No, and with all that history crammed into an area, surely it must be ripe for ghosts and hauntings. The other thing I thought was really interesting was that the sighting happened just for that briefest of moments where Kathryn saw the figure and then it just vanished. But it was as Kathryn was reading a name on one of the gravestones. Mm-hmm. And of course, we'll never know if the woman Kathryn saw was connected to the grave at all. But we have heard a lot of stories and had a few experiences ourselves that seem to have stemmed from people who just wanted to be remembered or recognised or acknowledged.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if there's an aspect of that to it, whether the act of reading the gravestone could have triggered somebody connected to it to appear. And actually, I've recently heard of a rather lovely thing that some people apparently do around this time of year. And this kind of reminds me of it. They visit neglected graveyards because we have quite a lot of them in England. We've got graveyards that date back to, goodness, like centuries and centuries. And obviously, as surviving relatives move away, it ends up that, there's none of the family around in the area anymore, and they just kind of get overgrown and nobody visits the graves anymore. So apparently some people visit these cemeteries that are all overgrown and neglected, and they go around and they read the names on the gravestones aloud to just remember these people.
Oh, that's really
And if it's
sweet.
really overgrown and everything, sometimes they'll tidy them up, and maybe sometimes even like leave a flower, just kind of give them a little bit of attention and read their names in remembrance. I just think that's such a lovely, sweet thing to do.
That is fantastic. That's really sweet. And it does actually bring to mind, because part of the history I was reading about this graveyard was that many of them at the time were kind of haphazard or not very well maintained. And this was one of the first that was organised in such a way that it could be mown, like the gravestones would be set at regular intervals to encourage. Yeah, so it could be tended so that people could visit as a place to maybe picnic or spend time, as opposed to just somewhere to bury the dead, effectively.
I see.
So, yeah, that's quite interesting. And it does kind of tie into the
does,
vibe, which I liked. The other thing that kind of ties in, similar to the story, was that it's quite common that people will see lights and shadow figures flitting between the gravestones, apparently.
In this granary
in this
burial ground.
specific burial ground.
Oh.
I didn't have much time to research it, so
No.
obviously we've not done the usual trailing
We haven't
through
done a quick dissertation.
100 years of like newspaper clippings, but it seems like the reports, it's quite common that people will see shadow figures and lights, which I found interesting, flitting between the gravestones.
That is interesting. That's usually something we call them over here will-o'-the-wisps. I don't know whether it's the same thing in America, but that's what we would think of, I think, as like will-o'-the-wisps, isn't it?
Yeah, that sort of, I imagine that's the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
I know, they also have like different animals like fireflies and things.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it
Which
may
we don't
well be
really
that
have.
they've got different names and traditions to the unnatural things than we do. But yeah.
Supernatural.
But like full apparitions, slightly less common, but still sometimes seen. But yeah, apparently this is quite a haunted graveyard. So I'm interested to know if anyone else has got any ghost stories.
Yeah,
from,
who else has visited? Please let us know.
Not just from there, but from the whole of the Freedom Trail, because some of the most pivotal moments in American history took place there.
Yeah.
Or with people that were from there or ended up there, like a really important place in history. So I would love to hear if anyone else has had any experiences there. And there's another thing that I've got it's really tenuous.
Is it another tenuous
really
link?
tenuous. There are some very famous people buried at the Granary Burial Ground. One of whom is Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the
I didn't
United
realise
States.
he was buried in Boston. Wow, okay. Well, my American history is atrocious, by the way.
And he's from around these parts.
He is from around these parts. He actually popped up very briefly in an episode we did on haunted pubs of Northamptonshire, didn't he, if I remember correctly?
Yes, his family, his ancestors came from a little village in Northamptonshire, which is about 10 minutes away from us by
it's
car.
like 10, 15 minutes.
Very close. I used to work there briefly. I know it very well. And yeah, like Benjamin Franklin is from there.
And his family have graves there, don't they?
Yes, there is still some members of his family buried in the churchyard at Ecton in Northamptonshire. So.
Yeah, I think it was on our list of places it was on our bucket list of places to pop to at some point, wasn't it? So if we do that, we'll let you guys know and we'll post some photos.
We'll take a picture and show you.
And if any of you guys have photos that you've taken on the Freedom Trail in Boston, please do send them to us. Post them on our social media. Pop them in the Facebook group. We'd love to see them and hear about your experiences.
Thank you so much to Kathryn for sharing that with us, and we'd love to hear more about those shadow figures, animals and noise disturbances you mentioned. But it's time now for our next story, and this one comes from Kate.
One day I was walking to my local shop, and at the time, everything seemed perfectly normal. As I went in, I happened to notice a car parked outside the shop with the sole occupant being a man in the driver's seat. I went inside and did my shopping, and as I was leaving, I noticed that the car was still there. But in the back seat, there was now an old lady and a small dog. The lady was dressed in Victorian-style clothing, and the lady and the dog were both grey. They definitely weren't there when I entered the shop. It was a very strange experience, and one I can't forget.
Now that was an unusual and interesting story, and Lil and I both had exactly the same reaction.
Yeah.
Like, I was putting the notes together for this, and Lil was putting her notes together, and then we're like, this story, and we both said, well, we'll have to explain it to you first. There's a really, really famous ghost photograph.
I know, even as we're saying ghost photograph of a car, a lot of you guys you'll know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
The first thing we said to each other was like, it just reminds us so much of that ghost photograph, and you guys know what we mean.
Yeah, it's a picture of a man sitting in the driver's seat of a car. And
An old-fashioned car.
An old-fashioned car. It looks sort of 50s or 60s. Black and white photo, and in the back seat there is an older woman, and I find it really creepy because it looks like her eyes are glowing.
The first few times I saw that photo, I thought the same thing. I was like, oh my goodness, that's incredibly creepy. There is this figure in the back seat. It's really quite clear, and it does look like the eyes are glowing. However, on closer inspection, this photo has been floating around for absolutely decades, hasn't it?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was taken in the 50s, so it literally has been decades. But in recent years, a lot, much better versions of it have come out to look at. When you look at it more closely, you can see that the person in the back seat is wearing glasses. So it's not that the eyes are glowing. It's the light from outside is just glinting off the frame of these glass, and the glasses are these really old-fashioned, very round, completely round style. And so it does make it look like creepy glowing eyes, but it's actually just light reflecting off. Well, I say just light reflecting off lenses, but the point is there was nobody there.
Yeah, there was no. I was just sitting here going, yeah, but it was a ghost. Like, how do you know
nobody
it
there.
wasn't glowing eyes? Like, you're saying this like, well, it's just a person in the back with the light reflecting off their glasses. There was nobody in the car other than him.
No. So the story was, what happened was this photograph was taken in the late 1950s by a lady called Mabel Chinnery. She was visiting her mother's grave in Suffolk, and she'd been taking some photos of the grave. But before she and her husband left for home, she snapped a picture of her husband in the car. And then, obviously, when they got the film developed, they had a bit of a surprise because they knew that nobody else had been in the car except her husband, and yet the developed photograph showed a very clear figure sitting in the back seat. And Mabel swore that it looked just like her mother, so it was very emotional for her. I kind of think it's lovely if it was her mother, because I just think that's so sweet that they were making this family trip that they did apparently every year to Suffolk to see her mother's grave and visit and, pay their respects. And the ghost of the mother just went, well, I'm coming.
Yeah.
I'm coming too. Let's have a day out. This is my day. This is about me.
She looks all dressed up as well.
She does, yeah. You can see
on the Sunday best to visit my grave.
This is the thing. There is actually, I mean, it is a grainy black and white photograph because it was from the 50s, but you can see a surprising amount of detail.
Yeah.
You can see that they're kind of wearing this dark jacket.
And she's looking right at the camera.
Yeah, I know. She's wearing this kind of dark jacket. It looks like a paler scarf that she's got like tucked into the jacket. And you can see cheekbones that are quite pronounced. You can see the nose, and then these very, very classic, old-fashioned, completely round glasses.
If you haven't seen it, you might be thinking, oh, maybe there's a slightly misty figure in the back of the car.
No.
It is clear. It is crystal clear.
And apparently it was looked at by photography experts in England at the time, and they all agreed that it hadn't been tampered with. They didn't think it was a fake, didn't think it was a double exposure or anything like that. So we really don't know what's going on. There doesn't seem to be any reason to doubt that it is an apparition. The only reservation I had at one point, and I've changed my mind about this now, was that I thought it was odd to just take a photo of her husband waiting in the car, because why would you bother?
This is a time when you had a very limited number of shots. Like, people today with digital cameras might think, well, what does it matter? Just take the picture.
Yeah.
But when you've only got 24 shots,
they're precious.
They're precious.
Because it was expensive. Like, film was really expensive. You had the cost of the film, you had the cost of getting it developed afterwards. So each shot cost you money twice. And also, if you were using a flash, like my first camera had a set of 6 flash bulbs that you plugged into the camera.
Yep.
So you might have a roll of 24 film, but if the lighting was low, you only had 6 shots that you could take in lower lighting, because they literally, once they exploded, that was it. They were done. Yeah,
a flash bulb literally burnt itself out to make the flash.
So that was a bit odd to me that you would waste a shot on that, kind of badly framed photo. However, when I read more about this, apparently this lady had just got this camera. So it was a new camera. She was excited to use it, and she was taking photos in the graveyard. And by the time they'd finished and they were about to go home, she only had 1 frame left. So she used it up, basically. Now, that makes far more sense to me, because I, as somebody that was into photography in the film days, I can remember the utter impatience to get that film developed. It wasn't a case of you finished the film and then you could look at the photos. You had to wait a week after you'd taken it to the chemist to get it developed and then get it back and then find out that half the shots were duff anyway.
Yeah, or plus there was a risk that if anything happened to your camera, the film would be ruined.
Yeah.
Because until it was rewound back inside its canister...
It was vulnerable.
There was a risk that it might get overexposed.
So, yeah, from that perspective, I can completely understand that you just want to use that last shot. You don't want to waste it completely. You want to take something worth taking. But, it wasn't a shot she kind of set up particularly. It was just like, I'll take a quick picture of my husband in the car. And then, I can get it rewound, get it safe, get it to the developers, and I can see what's on there, kind of thing. That makes more sense. So I don't have that as much of a reservation about that anymore. And there doesn't seem to be any other reason to doubt it.
No. I mean, it's definitely a photo that gives me a little bit of a chill when I see it.
Yeah. Although we've digressed massively. So to go back to Kate's story, in the story we were just talking about, obviously there's a very good reason for that apparition to be seen in that car.
Yeah.
But in Kate's story, we've got a Victorian, literally a Victorian grey lady ghost in the back of a modern car. And that is so wonderfully bizarre, because we hear on the show all the time, like, so many of the historical, the traditional ghost stories that come up over and over again. We hear about ghosts who've got, like, part of their legs aren't visible because the room they're walking through, the floor level has altered.
Yeah.
So the ghost isn't interacting with the modern environment. They're still walking through where the floor level used to be. Like the York merchants, the York Treasurer's House. Yeah. The York Treasurer's House ghost is a really
famous example
of that. Plural ghosts. It's a really famous example of that. But we've got a ghost, a Victorian grey lady ghost, just interacting with a modern car.
Yeah, it's strange.
It's, if it hadn't have been for the greyness of it, and I know what they mean because we've seen apparitions they're not always full Technicolor.
No.
We've seen apparitions that have been full colour. We've seen things that have just been white, things that have been darker than black. It's...
Yeah.
They appear in all kinds of different ways. So I would have potentially been tempted to think, well, was it somebody in fancy dress? But to have that grey colour of the woman and the dog and the Victorian clothing, no, that's something else going on.
That's a bit weird. Like, it's just one of those where I don't even know what to say. I'm completely stumped by it.
Yeah. And I love it.
Yeah, I love it.
I love being stumped.
Yeah, well, and this is kind of the thing about some of these stories. It kind of makes it feel more real because you're thinking, like if somebody tried to make this up, this wouldn't be what they would think of, I think.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
We've absolutely found that in our experiences, that some of the things we've seen, we hesitate to tell other people because they're so bizarre.
Yeah.
That they sound like, I don't know, they're just so out there. They don't follow a traditional kind of ghost story pattern, and they're the ones that intrigue me the most.
Yeah. I can picture myself in that position, just walking past the Victorian ghost in the back of a car, thinking, okay, that's a thing that I have seen.
Yep. So thank you to Kate. That was a really intriguing one. And that brings us to our last listener encounter for today. And this is from B, who wrote to us after listening to one of our previous episodes in which we discussed some very strange and spooky things that occurred on the M6, the longest motorway in England and one of the busiest. One of the stories we discussed was incredibly similar to something her mother had experienced when she was younger. B kindly wrote in to share that with us, as well as their own inexplicable occurrence on that road.
B writes, "My mum is sensitive to the paranormal and has had a few experiences over the years. She told me about an experience she had had about 20 years ago when she was driving back home along the M6 to Knutsford in the dark one night. Out of nowhere, she saw a lorry hurtling along the motorway towards her. She knew it was too late for her to get out of the way and avoid a collision, and in her panic, all she could do was brace herself for the inevitable impact. And then, just at the moment that the lorry would have ploughed into her car, it vanished completely. I have also had my own experience on the M6. I used to work early shifts in Carlisle, and at around 3:30 a.m, I was passing through T-Bay. It was pitch black, and because in that part of the fells my car radio would always lose signal, I had turned my radio off rather than listen to the annoying hiss of static. Suddenly, clear as day, my car radio started playing piano music. I didn't recognise the tune, but it went on for around 2 minutes. I was mildly creeped out, but waited for it to end, at which point I was expecting a presenter to start speaking and ID the station as Classic FM or something like that. I expected that the weird signal around there, combined with my incredibly old car, had jumbled up the reception and landed me on a station I don't usually listen to. But I was still surprised by this, as you really can't get anything on the radio on that part of the road. But once the piece of music had ended, silence again. There was nothing. That was it. I've never had that experience before or since. I've spent years thinking someone somewhere could probably explain it, but having listened to your podcast and the other tales of the M6, now I'm not so sure.
Thank you, B. That must have been really unsettling. What is it about that stretch of road, and what is it about radios? Because we've actually both had our own odd radio experiences.
Mm-hmm. So I think we've talked about these before, but probably a long time ago, so you may not have heard these. The one that really springs to mind to me was, I was really quite young. I must have been in my teens. This will possibly date me and show me up as being a super geek, but I was painting my Warhammer figurines from Warhammer 40,000. And the room opposite my bedroom was kind of like a junk room. And the carpet was a bit rough, so it didn't matter if I got paint on the floor or anything like that. It was just a kind of a place where it didn't really matter if you made a mess. So I used to do painting and things like that in there. And because I have ADHD, I would quite often drop tools in the middle of doing something, get distracted and wander off.
Yeah.
And so it perhaps wasn't surprising at one point that I found myself in my bedroom, watching TV, and I finished the program I was watching, turned off the television and heard the radio and thought, well, I must have left the radio on in the other room when I was painting. So I go back in to turn the radio off, and it was still playing music, but it was not plugged in, and batteries were expensive back then. It took 4 D-cell batteries.
I remember those boombox style radios where they had those huge batteries, and they buying a pack of 4 of those batteries cost a fortune. So you really, unless you were having a party and needed to take it outside, you plugged it in.
Yeah, and because the power button on it was tricky, the power button sort of turned it off, but it also was the AM, FM medium wave selector.
Yeah.
So because it was a bit of a faff, I just used to turn it off at the plug.
Yeah.
But it wasn't plugged in.
And there were no batteries?
And there were no batteries in it. Like I prefaced that with it took 4 D-cell batteries so that you knew that as
there was a reason.
A teen, having spent all my money on Warhammer figurines, I could not afford D-cell batteries, especially when I can just plug it into the wall.
And your parents can pay for it.
Yeah, and it's not like I used to go out with this. It was like a twin cassette deck thing. It wasn't like those big
ghetto
80s
blaster.
ghetto blasters. It was a little one. But yeah, not plugged in, no batteries. But as I was looking at it, it stopped.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
It was weird. It's really weird.
Is that the room in your parents' house that we heard the footsteps in that time we went over to feed the cats?
No.
Oh, is it a different room?
Yeah, it's been knocked through now. It's part of the bedroom on the field
I was thinking
side.
it was the same room that we were standing under when we heard somebody
that
walking
was my
upstairs.
old bedroom.
Oh, okay. Anyway, back to radios. So my weird radio experience was, unfortunately, it was quite sad because we'd had a loss in the family and we'd had a phone call to tell us about this loss. 24 hours later, at the same time we got that phone call, my radio alarm clock went off. Now, that may not sound odd, but you see, I have serious trouble getting up in the morning. So
not as much as I do.
No, not as much as you do. So as a teen, I'd got myself a radio alarm clock thinking, well, I'll have the radio blast me out of bed in the morning. That'll wake me up. I very quickly realised that was just going to make me angry for the rest of the day. I'm very, very picky about my music. I don't actually ever listen to the radio. I find it very difficult to listen to music that's not kind of the right vibe in the right moment. I'm extremely particular. So I absolutely could not cope with having unwanted music blasting my ears first thing in the morning. So I turned off I never used the radio. I used it like twice, realised I couldn't handle it. And then I just used it as a clock and had like the beepy thing on. So the radio hadn't been touched for like 2 years. It was not set to use the radio, let alone go off. And it definitely wasn't set to go off at that time because it was like evening. Mm-hmm. So not a time when I would be waking up, even if you took away 12 hours and, I'd got it on the wrong, like a 12-hour setting or 24-hour setting instead of a 12-hour. It wasn't a time that it had ever been set to go off. It wasn't set to go off as a radio. But it just went off at the time, like 24 hours after we got this phone call. At the same time, the radio just started playing in my bedroom. And I wasn't in there.
That's so weird.
We all just heard it go off, and it was loud as well. And I just went in there not really knowing what to expect to find, to be honest. It was quite spooky.
Yeah, I had the same sort of thing. Can you remember what song was playing? I was trying to remember what song was playing on the radio, that the one where I had my experience, but I can't remember. And
that's a really good point. I wish
that was important.
Yeah, it might have been, and I wish I'd had the wherewithal at the time to think about that. But I was just freaked out because I was young, and I was like, "What on earth is going on?"
Yeah, because mine, I didn't even think anything of it until I realised, oh, this isn't plugged in.
This isn't plugged in.
It just, I wasn't paying attention because it wasn't out of the ordinary until that point.
No.
But I honestly can't remember what was playing. I just remember the radio was on.
There is something very odd about radios. I mean, if you're a regular listener, that you might know that we use radios in some of our paranormal experiments. We kind of do a poor man's version of the Estes method because we can't afford a spirit box thing. But it works nevertheless. And one thing we've wanted to do for ages is get one of those build your own crystal radio sets, the really old-fashioned ones, to see if we can do anything with that. But we were looking for ages, weren't we? And just like nowhere was selling them. So we'll have to look at that again. We'll have to get back on that project.
I'll have to see if I can find something. There's one thing, like I think we're almost wrapping up here now for this last story, but there's one thing that's literally just sprung to mind. And that was with B's story, classical music, like silence, piano piece, then silence again. Yeah. Not exactly the same, but it kind of reminds me of number stations.
Oh, don't mention number stations to me because they freak me out. You would like all of the paranormal stuff we do, the ghost hunts we've been on, I've done lone vigils locked in an ancient prison cell by myself with a Ouija board, and I've been fine with any of that. But you play me a few seconds off a number station and I am in pieces. I can't, and they freak me out so much I can't even tell you.
It was only because I've been working on something that has a tangential connection to number stations for an upcoming episode, and part of that is it starts and ends its messages with like a nursery rhyme song.
Yeah,
and it was just
freaks me out.
it just this bit of music that was like, literally just right now, it's just twigged in my head and thought, that's interesting.
But it can't be that though, because then you'd have the numbers.
You'd
repeating
have
numbers
something else that like it kind of just rang that bell in my head that it sort of sounded interesting.
But yeah, it's like your radio didn't have any batteries. This, B had no signal, so if there was no static,
this is the thing. Like, if it was purely signal, you kind of expect it to, like, we've all done this back in the analog days, like not so much now with digital, but for those of you that may not be aware of this, in the analog days, like the signal strength varied, and your radio strength could get a bit crackly and cut in and out. But it wasn't like a hard, it's either on or it's not.
No.
You could sort of slowly get a sort of really quiet signal that would build up. And not like this. This feels very digital. Like it wasn't there, and then it definitely was, and then it definitely wasn't.
And that's just not how it works.
No,
is it?
not with analog.
If you were driving through an area, as B says, where the signal was absolutely awful, it would most likely be coming in and out.
Yeah.
You would hear it kind of ramp up a bit as you drove into it. You'd get static, and then you'd tail off in static as you came out of the area where you picked up the signal. But this is that's very strange.
Yeah.
And spooky.
I'm sure that you could have some kind of physical barrier or atmospheric condition that could trigger it, but the fact that it kind of coincided.
But they had turned the radio off, though.
Yeah. That is probably the most important point that I wasn't taking into consideration. Yes, the radio was off, which was the most important point. Yes, that definitely makes it extremely spooky, and nothing to do with like radio bouncing off the clouds or anything like that. No, that definitely makes it a bit weird.
Well, that's going to do it from us this episode. Thank you so much to Kathryn, Kate and B for sharing their stories. And if you have a paranormal encounter to share, please do get in touch through our website at knockoncevs.com. We hope you enjoyed this first instalment of Spooky Season Shorts, and that you'll join us next week as we continue the countdown to Halloween 2025. Happy October, everyone.